The poet is crazy. Wei Xiangdong acted vigorously and resolutely. 11 minutes later, Chu Tian, also known as Gao Honghai, stood in Wei Xiangdong's general duty room. Wei Xiangdong first asked Gao Honghai to do 3 against. That is, his nose tip against the wall, his belly against the wall, and his toes against the wall. Gao Honghai's 3 against were accompanied by a shameful inner journey. According to Wei Xiangdong's words, he must use this period of time to expose his problems. Think hard. He was against for 45 minutes, which meant Gao Honghai exposed himself for 45 minutes. According to Wei Xiangdong's order, he turned around. Wei turned on all the light switches and moved the desk lamps to shine on Gao Honghai's face. Gao Honghai had a round ball of lime on his nose tip, like a clown in Peking opera. Wei Xiangdong said, "Thought through." Gao Honghai didn't say anything, but he peed. His shoes were filled with his urine and spilled all over the floor. Wei Xiangdong said, "Have you thought through?" Gao Honghai whispered, "Yes." Wei Xiangdong said, "Tell me." Without the telling, there wouldn't be shocking. Since the poet's coat was taken off, Gao Honghai revealed his extremely dirty inner world. He actually loved 8 girls at the same time, namely Wang Qin, Li Dongmei, Gao Zijuan, Cong Zhongxiao, Shan Xia, Tong Zhen, Lin Aifen, and Qu Meixi. According to Gao Honghai's own confession, as soon as he went to bed at night, mainly after turning off the lights, Gao Honghai began to think about them, and think about them one by one. There were poems to prove it. Your long hair is flying in the wind. It is the tiredness in my heart. The black chaos makes me intoxicated. Again and again in my dreams, I recall it. I want to touch it. But there is only your back in the distance. You are my little bird. You are my butterfly. Ah, the rain is my tears. This poem was dedicated to Li Dongmei by Gao Honghai. Wei Xiangdong stared at Gao Honghai, breathing heavily. However, Gao Honghai obviously didn't notice teacher Wei's breathing. He was immersed in his own poems. His eyes were confused, and he was getting more and more excited. He also gave the example of Qu Meixi. I'm wandering, oh, I'm wandering in the distance. You are the bride of dreams. I want to get closer to you bit by bit, but you hide. Gao Honghai recited one after another, and he became complacent. He was so excited that he didn't realize how dangerous Wei Xiangdong's expression was. Wei Xiangdong stared at him. The more he listened, the angrier he became. He suddenly slammed the table and shouted loudly, "No rhymes! Speak up! No rhymes!" Gao Honghai's shoulders were quickly stiff, and his mouth stopped. When his shoulders slowly relaxed, he looked at Wei Xiangdong deathly, not talking anymore. Gao Honghai did something utterly shocking the next morning. In his classical literature, the professor was teaching Su Dongpo's Nian Nu Jiao Radcliffe Lament. The literature professor in his 50s spoke Mandarin with a southern accent. Nu and Lu are not distinguished. Neither are zhi chi shi and zi ci si. His voice was very high-pitched, but when excited, it became sharp, with an air of soaring into the sky and a sense of self-indulgence. And his eyes glowed hotly behind his glasses. To explain when he first married the younger Jiao, he had a resounding gallantry. The professor introduced it, which naturally involved if the east wind gave no way to Zhouyu. The professor turned round and wrote on the blackboard, the Qiao sisters would be locked up in Tongque Terrace in late spring. At this time, Gao Honghai stood up and pointed out sternly, "No rhymes!" The literature professor turned around and asked carefully, "What did you say?" Gao Honghai turned out to slam the desk with a thud. Gao Honghai shouted at the top of his lungs, "No rhymes!" His tone was extremely majestic, as if he could swallow mountains and rivers. The literature professor was obviously hit by an unexpected blow. He looked at Gao Honghai, held his temper, and said patiently, "Comrade Citian, you wrote modern poetry. Modern poetry does not need to rhyme, but classical poetry must be like this. This is not about permission, the musical regulation and form required. It can only be like this." Gao Honghai was very angry and insisted very stubbornly, "No rhymes!" "Isn't this unreasonable? Isn't this nonsense?" The professor was stunned, filled with grimaces. The bell just rang for the end of the class. The professor vented all his grimaces on the phrase, "Class is over." He picked up the handout and left. However, Gao Honghai refused to give up. He focused on the literature professor and repeatedly issued his order to him, "No rhymes!" The professor could not hold back this time and exploded. He grabbed Gao Honghai with his skinny hand and dragged him all the way to the academic affairs office. The literature professor said loudly to the dean, "It was Su Dongpo who rhymed it. It's not me. How could I not rhyme it? Isn't that ridiculous?" He was very agitated, but the director did not know the ins and outs of the matter, could not understand, and his face was full of fog. He said calmly, "What's going on?" The literature professor grew increasingly furious, and his face turned purple. "If my class is not good and you have any opinions, you can tell me. Not in this way. It was Su Dongpo who rhymed it. I say it again, not me." The director still looked blank, and his confused eyes kept looking at the literature professor and Chu Tian. At this time, the principal came over. The professor pulled the principal over, and his voice became even sharper. "If the class is not good, he can tell me, but not in this way." More and more people gathered around, including teachers and students. The principal raised his chin and said, "Tell me carefully, what's going on?" The professor pulled Gao Honghai over all the way to the principal. "Let him speak for himself." Gao Honghai's energy had already gone away. However, the mouth is still stubborn. The professor mumbled to himself, "Ridiculous." Gao Honghai immediately became energetic. "No rhymes." "Ridiculous." "No rhymes." "Ridiculous." "No rhymes." The literature professor started to shake, speechless. "You are mentally ill." He dropped these words, turned around, and walked away. The literature professor's words more or less reminded the principal. He looked at Gao Honghai, bent down, put one hand behind his waist, and stretched out the other hand kindly, wanting to touch Gao Honghai's forehead with the back of his hand. Gao Honghai pushed the principal's right hand away very arrogantly, with a sad and melancholy look on his face. Gao Honghai said slowly, 5 fingers. To be honest, it's a hand. When you clenched them into a fist, I felt so sad." The principal wanted to smooth things over and said with a smile, "Until rhyming again." "No rhymes!" The principal turned around, put his mouth to the director's ear, and whispered, "Make a call and get an ambulance."